So let me give an overview of what we're learning and the context and so on. I did a little more research and looked in deeper a little into what we've been discussing. As I've said numerous times, the theme of this magnum opus, what I like to call the Mount Everest of mysticism, in the name of Hemshech Tafresh Ayin Beis, almost 2,000 pages of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad's Rebbe, where he consolidates and organizes and connects. What's going on there? Are you hearing me twice?
I hear you perfect.
Just a second. Just a second. If everybody can go on mute, please. Something is wrong with this recording.
Yeah, I hear some feedback.
I know, that's what I'm trying to get corrected here.
In general, YouTube is always a couple of seconds delay.
I know, but I don't usually hear the sound back. I'm hearing sound back.
Maybe somebody's listening to both.
Can everybody just make sure to mute yourself, if you don't mind, so I can just get the... I don't have to mute everybody myself. Can everybody just make sure to mute yourself, if you don't mind, so I can just... Okay, let me continue. Okay. So let me continue. Sorry for that, some technical glitch here. So I was saying was that this magnum opus, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, takes all the, I would say, all the central themes and even not so central, all the themes of Kabbalah and Hasidus, and gathers them together. But it's not just gathering them. Once you put them in context, it adds a whole new dimension of depth and connection and nuances. And the central theme is interface, which is the interface between the divine and existence, between transcendence and our reality, which of course poses the tremendous dilemma and quandary, because the divine is completely removed from and no way similar to existence. The creation and the creator have nothing in common, except that one was created by the other. So if we were to say, okay, we're a product and we try our best to connect to some extent, to be aware of our producer, of our creator, is one thing. But you're talking about a relationship, you're talking about a partnership even. So many different verses that talk about loving one another, understanding God, appreciating. All that is far more than just doing his bidding, like a servant would serve a master. As such, and many more reasons, there's the need for an interface to understand how we can connect. Because that itself, connecting, requires that we have some ladder which to climb, or stepping stones, which is essentially the purpose of Seder Hishtalshlus. Seder Hishtalshlus is the cosmic order through which the process through which the creation happens, existence comes into being, and the process through which existence reconnects and retraces the steps to reunite with its source. And hence the entire elaboration throughout Ayin Beis, which, as I said, distills so much from previous discourses of the Rebbe Marash and the Tzemach Tzedek and the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, which in turn distills the mystics and the teachers that preceded him, including the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov, going back to the Arizal, the Rashbi and the Zohar and everything in between, is all struggling with this question of how you create this connection, this interface, a true relationship. Now, just among many benefits of that, I mean, I can go on here, I don't want to go into a whole discussion, why do we need this relationship? But on a very basic level, if you don't have a relationship with something, you can never be passionate, and it cannot be a dynamic filled with vitality and energy. You know, if someone hires you to do a job and you hate your job and you have no relationship with the one who's hired you, you'll do it to get paid, but you'll do it by rote, robotically, mechanically, because why should you put more energy into it? If we were just commanded to do mitzvahs, to do good deeds, so yes, there may be some people who are just very loyal and dedicated, and they would do as best as they can. But it's a whole other dimension when you have a relationship with the one that you're doing it for or with. It's a whole different story. When you hear the mitzvah, for us in the Migdash, build for me a sanctuary, I will rest among you, I will dwell among you. In other words, you're not just building a building for someone as a hired gun, it's a relationship. It's an intimate relationship. It takes on a whole different shape. That's why the Gemara says, the Talmud says, that someone who studies Torah and does not say Birchas HaTorah, does not bless and acknowledge that this is God's Torah, it says ultimately they will forsake the Torah. Why? The Torah is a very powerful book, very academic, very brain stimulating, mind stimulating, it's profound. I mean, if you study the Talmud, it's very profound. It's very enjoyable. So why would you forsake it? Because you don't have a relationship with it. It's studying. Tomorrow, you can study mathematics or physics. Who is it that said, I heard from, in the early years, in the 40s, I think. So there was a whole discussion with the Board of Education in New York, somewhere in the United States, I think New York, where they were saying, listen, the most important thing for children to study are the sciences and the physical sciences, mathematics, accounting, business, literature, history. Why do you insist studying Torah? So one of the meetings, one of the rabbis said, because we love the author. We love the author. When they heard that, a light bulb went off. You love the author, it's a whole different commitment than if you're just reading a book. That's why we dance with the Torah and Simchas Torah. We cry over the Torah. We bless it. We kiss it. Even the greatest Shakespearean scholar doesn't kiss books of Shakespeare and definitely doesn't dance with them. Because it's not just a study, it's a relationship. It's a love. It's a loving relationship. When you read in the Torah about Moses on the mountain, Pasha Kisisa and other places, you could see there was a love. There's an intimacy there, how God speaks to Moshe. And Moshe says, show me your face. And God says, no one can see my face. I mean, this is a very deep relationship. So it's not just that we exist on this earth and we follow moral laws, which is nice. To be a moral person as opposed to immoral person is quite an achievement. Instead of selfish, but it's far, far more. Judaism and Torah teaches us you can reach more than just being a moral person. You could actually become godly. You could actually be a partner with God. And you were actually created in the divine image. But once you go into that terrain, to that territory, it becomes a big philosophical and theological dilemma. How do these two meet? So there you have the long, extended discussion, step by step by step. I'm not going to go now through a whole summary of Ayin Beis. I often do that on Sundays. But I'll just say briefly, the bottom line is the Rebbe Rashab goes through the entire map, if you wish, the entire structure of how a simple mortal human being on earth, with all our petty concerns and pedestrian issues, can actually connect, actually grow and climb and connect with the highest levels of the divine, even all the way to the source itself. But to do so requires, number one, a persistent avodah, which means you're working on yourself, refining yourself, and it's persistent, it's consistent. It has to be an ongoing. It's not a one-time thing you do for fun once a week. It's an ongoing process. And there are the stepping stones as you acclimate yourself to more higher levels of subtlety and spirituality and ethereal, the more you're receptive to grow even further. That's how it works. Just like you can't teach a child from ABC to jump into the deepest philosophies. You have to go step by step. The same thing is here. At the end of the day, we begin as very physical creatures. What we're most accustomed to on a daily basis is eating and drinking and sleeping and satisfying our physical pleasures. For good or for bad, that's how we are. And if you're left undisciplined, a person will gravitate towards self-indulgence as much as possible. And some psychologists say that's actually how we're wired. Obviously, Torah does not agree and comes with a very different perspective that we were created in a divine image, which is our soul, which in turn is placed inside a body, which is physical. And there's a battle that's going on between the two, between the spiritual and the material. The whole Tanya, first section of Tanya, is based on this battle, the battle between the two. And there's a pleasure, a divine pleasure. There's a purpose in this battle. As we battle, we become more refined. As we become more refined, we become more receptive to the divine as it works through our soul. But we climb every day in davening, we say it, every morning prayer. After Modani, we acknowledge, thank you for giving me back my soul. Then we say, this soul, the soul that you've given me, you've instilled in me, Tahiri, it's pure. You created it, you formed it, and you instilled it, imbued it in me, and you protect it within me. It's a bunch of expressions here. What is the difference in Tahira, right there you see it's a journey. The soul has many levels that it can travel on, and the soul itself has many dimensions. The point being is that all these steps are necessary, and you can't skip a step. Once in a while, you can skip a step, you can skip several steps. There are shortcuts, but remember, every shortcut you have to come back and read and integrate it. So let's say Yom Kippur is a shortcut. And Yom Kippur, suddenly there's a burst connection between the essence of the soul, the essence of the divine. The day itself forgives. But let's be honest. After Yom Kippur, just that alone is not going to sustain you. You now have to integrate that. So even though there are times that you can jump and so on, at the end of the day, it's a process. It's a process of growth. And the more you internalize it, the more it becomes yours, and the more you can interface. Remember, if it's not yours, it's not an interface. Yes, God can be merciful and lift you out of your pit, so to speak, but that's God lifting you out. The key is us to internalize it. And this is the long process and the long discussions. The Rebbe Rashab, who addresses it on all the different levels, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, from our level down here on earth as we begin the journey, and the other way around from Atzmos, the core essence of how the journey traveled downward. And it's all a journey for this relationship. And if you ask, why does God want this relationship? There, we're going into the territory called Nesava, beyond logic, because logic itself is part of what God wanted. So you can't justify logic with logic when logic is a creation itself. So it comes from some desire. The closest word we can use is a pleasure, Nesava, a taiva. It's a word that really is a human word. It means I have a taiva. I have an irrational, a super irrational desire for something. There's no explanation why. And as such, that's an example that there's something in Atzmus. Atzmus is beyond logic, is beyond even desire, but we have to use some word, so we use a word that symbolizes something that is not, you can't ask questions about. But after that, you could ask a lot of questions because the rest of it is definitely structured in a logical system. In other words, it's not a crazy, illogical way this happens. So from Atzmus, moving downward is a process, and the same thing from the bottom up. Now, Ayin Beis, I can go through the different chapters from the beginning, and you can see each section of Ayin Beis covers another one of these steps of the interface. Every part of the interface is covered. And what was I going to say? Oh, so in the beginning of Ayin Beis, he begins really on the highest levels. He starts beginning how God begins the process of wanting existence, which he calls Rotzen, Keser. He desires it. That creates a relationship because when you want something, there's a connection. But a key point to remember is that Rotzen is not Atzmus. Because as I said, Rotzen, as much as he wants it, as much as he's removed from it, once he wants something, there's some relationship between the one who wants and what they want. So you have to say there are levels higher than Rotzen. And that he does not address till a little later in Ayin Beis. But wherever you go in Ayin Beis, you can find the section of the map or the section of the stepping stones or the ladder, whatever example you want to use, that demonstrates a connection between two entities, a higher entity, another entity. Keser, for example, is the connection between something that wants to the levels below it. That's why there's a Keser, not just a Keser Klali, a general desire for existence, but a desire for specific rooms in this structure, for details. So there's a Keser of Atzilus and a Keser of Bria. There's a desire for each part of this process, of this interface. Now, as you go along in Ayin Beis, he starts going downward and starts speaking about the lower levels, the connection between Atzilus and Bria, the connection between intellect and emotions, the connection between the superconscious and the conscious, the connection between the blueprint, which is Ak, and the rest of existence. I can go on, but essentially every step is covered. So where are we now? So interestingly now, he's moved back, all the way back to the top. The earliest stages of where the interface begins to emerge, beginning from Atzmus. So he's actually going back to things he spoke about in the early part of Ayin Beis, back in volume 1. But actually here, there's some things he's saying that were not even said earlier. So I'm going to point that out now, and in the context that I hope will help us understand what we're learning right now. But I think if you have the backdrop that I just described, this whole interface, it helps tremendously to put things into context to understand what are we talking about? Why are we talking about this? Okay, so overall, a few key points to make, and then I will bring it back to where we are learning right now. As I mentioned before, once you talk about Atzmus, Atzmus is the name, Atzmus Mohus sometimes is the word used. Once you talk about Atzmus and Atzmus Mohus, you're talking about something that has nothing in common with our reality, which of course then poses the dilemma, can we ever connect to something that's nothing in common with us? And there are three terms we've learned, both in Ayin Beis and Sadik Dal, which is the parallel to Ayin Beis in the Frierdiker Rebbe's discourse in 1933. The term is Mitziusim Atzmusei, Bilta Mitzias Nimtza, and Mechuyev HaMitzias. I'll explain. Bilta Mitziusim Atzmusei is an expression from Ageres Haked from the Alter Rebbe, Tanya, section 20, in the fourth section of Tanya, the Epistle 20, Chaf. And there he's referring to the identity of Atzmus, unlike anything else, is that his existence does not have a source. He himself is the source for his own existence, basically. B'tziyusei ma'atzmusei. His existence comes from his own being. Nothing, you can't say that about anything. Everything has a source. That immediately tells you that he's unlike any type of existence, because we don't understand that existence, that's presence, is just defined, that created itself, so to speak. Can't say God created himself, but nothing in this existence does not have a source. So that brings us to expression number 2, which is Metzias built to Metzias Nimtza. Yes, indeed, his existence is a non-existential existence by the terms that we call existence. For us, something exists, it has to be present. In some way, it manifests. It has some form, some definition, even the most subtle. Atzmus is not subject to that in any way. And the third is mechuyev. He must exist. Everything else must not exist. It could not. If the creator puts it there, it exists. If it not, then not. He could give off light. He could not give off light. Okay, so once you have that, and we learned this at length in the previous discourse, how can that ever connect? How could a Metzias Nimtza connect to a built-in Metzias Nimtza? The answer lies, if you think about it, in a very interesting way, and this is, of course, a lot of this is the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus. In the Kabbalists pre the Alter Rebbe were not able to the pre-Alter Rebbe had difficulties going this high, so their reconciliation was on lower levels. But the Alter Rebbe, by introducing the concept of Oyer and explaining that Oyer is the first interface, solves a bunch of dilemmas. The first it solves is Oyer does not have any substance of its own. So as soon as you say Oyer, which is a reflection of, it is essentially a paradoxical entity. It exists and doesn't exist at the same time. It exists because it's a reflection, but it doesn't exist because it has nothing of its own. Its entire existence is only to reflect its source. Anything else, even Ratzon, even though the desire for something is your desire, so it has nothing but the one who desires, but the fact that it's a desire has already a certain shape and form. It desires something. Oyer doesn't desire anything. Oyer is only one thing. It's a reflection. The source has chosen to reflect itself. Now, here is the key thing to keep in mind, and that's where I'm going now into, we'll learn it inside in a minute, but I want to give before we learn it inside, the context outside, the context outside of the actual text. So the question still remains, okay, but Atzmus and Oyer are infinitely distant. Because as much as Oyer has no existence of its own, it's still not Atzmus. As we said, you can't even define God as a Moyer. You can't call him a source of light, like let's say the sun. He's far beyond that. But yet, he has the capacity to give off light. So this is what the Alter Rebbe was machadash, a word called Yechelis. It's actually the Tzemach Tzedek that revealed it to us. In 2 places we find the Tzemach Tzedek says, I saw a manuscript from my grandfather where he's describing Ein Sof, and he uses the word Yechelis. Yechelis means capacity, ability, potential, you can say, but I don't want to use potential. He has the ability, because to say that Atzmus, built in Metzias Nimtza, does not have the ability to do something, obviously you cannot say. So interestingly, Yechelis ha'atzmus is just as much atzmus as atzmus is, because it has not taken on any shape and form. It's just God's ability, his ability to do what? To manifest through Oyer. So if you want to put it in different words, built the Metzias Nimtza has a Yechelis to express himself through Metzias Nimtza. Now that doesn't mean that Metzias Nimtza, the existence that we identify as existence, is built to Metzias Nimtza. Because once it's Metzias Nimtza, it's not built, but the Yechelis is part of built to Metzias Nimtza. So here is where ultimately the interface reaches the highest point. That everything in existence is created. The Yesh for sure, because the Yesh is not even godly, as I discussed on Friday. You look at a stone, you look at a regular physical matter, there's nothing about it that reflects godliness. You could say it was created by God. It's a product by God, the producer. But it doesn't reflect until there's avodah, until you work on it, until you do something. It's as a matter of fact, if anything, it says, it came from nowhere, so to speak. It doesn't have any identifiable source. And like Mitzusi Matzmuse, It doesn't have a cause that you can identify that brought it here. Once you accept there's a God, and once you identify, you think about it, yes, this mitzvah will teach us something, give us ktsas musig, a little sense of what atzmus is like. But on its own, it doesn't reflect godliness. Even at, so that's yesh. But you could say, what about Oyer? Oyer does reflect godliness. Atzilus is godly. Atzilus is Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Teferes. All of them are godly attributes. The Chesed of God, God's doing Chesed. Avram Avinu, who was a personified Chesed of Atzilus, he was a walking Chesed of godliness. Godliness, not God. The godly attribute called Chesed. But yet, as we learned, also that is not created by itself. Remember, we learned even the Yesh HaNetzal is also Mitziyu says not Mitzadatzme. So though it has a kiyum and it has a certain perpetual value of its own because it's a divine, because of its bitl, and it's reflecting the divine, and that there's a truth to that, but you can't call that Atzmus. It's still not the source. So basically, the source, Atzmus, created things that are yes, that don't reflect his godliness, and there are things that do reflect godliness, but both of them are not Atzmus. But the Yechelis HaAtzmus, the ability, his ability to illuminate, to reflect in Oyer, that is Atzmizdik. So in a sense, you can say that ultimately, there's one place where Oyer meets Atzmus when it's not Oyer. It's the ability of Atzmus to give off Oyer. She could say, one second, what about his ability to create? That also seems to be. The only difference is the creation does not reflect the godliness. So you can't say that it on its terms is connected. That needs to be worked on. Oyer is two things. Number one, it's God's capacity to reflect himself in a Metzias Nimtza. It's still the capacity, and the way it reflects is that it completely reflects godliness. In other words, Oyer itself will tell you that I'm not the source. The source is Atzmus. The source is built to Metzias Nimtza. And that built to Metzias Nimtza has the capacity to reflect. And all I am is that reflection of his capacity. So in a sense, you could say that Oyer, that is Metzias Nimtza, which we'll learn about in a moment. Etzema Oyer. And Oyer, as it stands in Atzmus, capacity, Yechelis to give off Oyer, have something in common. Nothing in common in their personality, but they're both. One is the capacity to give light, and one is the actual light, which reflects, of course, the divine. Yesh, on the other hand, it teaches us about the personality of Metzusim Atzmuse, but it doesn't reflect it. There's no reflection of it in any revealed way. I just want to say, if anybody's asking any questions, I put this on mute. I put you all on mute because there's this background sound that's coming back. So I don't want to hear it, and I didn't want to reflect. I want to just ask everybody if everything is going smoothly. Can you hear me clearly and everything is fine? I'll unmute for a second.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
What?
It's good. It's good.
Sounds good.
Very.
Okay, so I will not be able to take questions. If somebody wants to ask a question, if you don't mind, just lift your hand and I'll unmute, because when I unmute right now, there's a background echo and I just don't want it to be part of this recording. It's just making me crazy. So if somebody wants to say anything, just do me a favor, raise your hand. I'll look at the screen and I'll unmute, okay? Just for now, we got to figure out, I don't know what the problem is exactly. And I apologize to those on YouTube because you're hearing all this technical glitches, but so be it. What can I tell you? Okay, let me see if anyone's raising their hand. Nobody is. I'll even stop. If anybody wants to ask questions, I'll stop. Anybody wants to ask anything? Okay. I'm glad you're not asking yet because I haven't finished yet.
I would like to
I'm
ask.
giving background to this whole discussion here.
Hello.
What we establish now is that there's Atzmus capacity, we call it Yechelis Lahoyer, which is still Yechelis. It's not yet Oir. It's God's Atzma's ability to reflect in Oir. Then there's Oir itself. In Oir itself is what we're learning here. There are two levels. Etzema Oir and Ispashtus Oir. These are going to be the two levels of Ayin that he began this mimer with. So let me go back to that, and then I'll explain. You remember, he said everything in Ishtalshlus and higher than Ishtalshlus, everything in the cosmic order and beyond is structured Yesh, Ayin, Yesh. Yesh is Atzmus, the first source. The Yesh HaNivra is on the other end of the spectrum, is us. That's us. We are the created entity. The Yesh HaNivra, he also says Yesh HaNetzal. Anyway, whatever it is, it's a product of the creator. Not the producer, it's the product. And then there's the interface. The Mamutze B'neihem, he said. Mamutze, he used the word Mamutze, is the Ayin. Ayin is a state of nothingness, meaning it doesn't have an identity. And that's the interface. It's the level of Oir. But he said, when you break it down, that Ayin breaks into two. Because for this to be a logical procession, as we discussed before, you need a ladder. You can't have a jump. You can't have rungs missing. How do you get, once you get to rung number 2, number 3, and then there's 20 rungs missing, you can't jump. So there has to be some commensurate, proportionate progression. So you have Yesh Amiti, you have the Ayin Amiti. That's the Oir that relates to Atzmus, how Atzmus is reflecting through Oir. And then there's the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra. That's how the Yesh relates to an Ayin that's more tailored to it. It's the Oir, the divine energy, as it relates to existence. So what he's going to be doing now in Ayin Beis, and of course Tzadik Dalet as well, which follows Ayin Beis, he's going to explain what are these two levels of Ayin, where are they? I didn't count, and I'd have to go through, but I think he explains it at least in 4 different ways. What we're learning now is the highest level. The first Ayin is the Oir Etzema Oir Atzmi, as he called it. The second Ayin is the Oir Hashayach La'elamus, all before the Tzimtzum. Then he's going to speak about that the two is Sevav Mamala, and later he's going to discuss it on lower levels. I'll just tell you quickly. I think just give me a moment. Yeah, in Atzilus itself, and I think even lower. I'm not positive right now, but it's not relevant right now to this discussion. So in other words, what he's dissecting here is the actual interface. How does the interface work? Remember, an interface has to have a part of each thing it's connecting. It can't just be God expressing himself through Oir, because that Oir is still a godly type of Oir. It's still overpowering and overwhelming and beyond existence. On the other hand, the Oir that manifests and goes and enters and relates to existence is one that relates to existence. You want to have something that connects to each. So these two levels of Ayin or Oir, that's what he's describing, are two levels of Oir. And what did he say? He said like this: the etzem itself, the Yesh HaMiti, he says, is not subject to any type of gradation. So you can't put it into any procession. It's Atzmus is Atzmus. Where can you discuss procession? In other words, gradations and levels and structure in Oir, because Oir is a reflection, and a reflection is subject to diminishment. B'smayid b'hamshachose. And he gave the example of the Oir HaVuka, the flame of a torch. If you're closer to the torch, the flame is stronger. You're farther, the flame is weaker. The Frierdiker Rebbe and Tzadik Dalet gave the example of Oir HaNefesh, that there's the etzem of the nefesh that's equal in the whole body, but then there's the way the nefesh manifests in each part of the body according to its needs. Okay, So then he went over to, I'm not going to talk about Ratzon for a moment because I want to make it a little easier to understand. What was confusing, at least to me, when you read it first, he goes right into Ratzon Klali, Ratzon Prati, and so on. But when you read the whole thing, you come away and you realize like this. What he says is that these two levels of Eir, one is an Eir that relates to existence, and one there's an Eir that relates to the source, is only a reflection of the source. He says that Eir Atzmi, that's not the Eir in the parentheses, Hakol Batzmusei Mamish, Shenikra Shmoy HaKadman. Okay, so that's what I was talking about is Yechelis. What is this level that's completely encompassed in Atzmus? So in Samach Vav, which is based on the Yechelis, what I mentioned before from the Samach Tzedek, says that's the Yechelis HaAtzmus to give off light. But it's still just like Atzmus. That's why it's called Kodem Kekadmuse. You can't separate between God and God's abilities. It's not like a human being. We could say, I exist and I have abilities. Those are all levels. In Atzmus, since there's no levels, so his Yechelis is just like him. So his Yechelis to give off light, and for that matter, his Yechelis to create, is all one with Atzmus. The only difference is that light reflects godliness and yesh, existence, does not. So that's, he says, we're not discussing that here. That is a level that explains how Atzmos connects to Eir through the God's Yechelis. So how God looks at Eir, so to speak, if you wish. But it's not yet Eir. Then he says, then Eir itself, there's a level that you also can't call Eir, but for a different reason. It's already now the Metzias Nimtza of Eir, but it's not in any way functional, because all it is the fact that God expressed a field of energy, as I mentioned. So you're talking now about Etzema Eir, its only focus is that I am God's instrument, if you wish. I am God's energy. I am God, a reflection of godliness, a reflection of Atzmus. But this is a step down from the Shmoy HaKadman, because Shmoy HaKadman, you can't even call that. There's no I. It's Atzmus has the capacity to give off light, but he didn't give it off. Now we're talking about there's light, but light has not yet taken on any shape and form of Gilui or Hispashtus. It is what it is. It's just a reflection of Atzmus. That's all it is. This is going to call as the higher level of Ayin. And then there's a next level of Eir that where its relationship with existence begins. The Eir is now beginning to want, desire, Ratzon Klali, and a Ratzon Prati. We said Shir Atzmei B'Kayach. Now we're already talking about it's taking on, it's envisioning existence. Still Lifnei Tzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum, but you can at least say it's envisioning something. Now, I want to add one more thing, then I'm going to stop for questions, and then we'll read it inside and I'll explain it all in that context. The one thing I want to add is this. In some places in Chassidus, it says that Oyer and Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum in general is Kolol Batzmusei. It's Era Kolol Batzmusei. Why? Because that's why we need the Tzimtzum. It's after the Tzimtzum that Eir really becomes an entity, the Kav, and everything the Kav will create, including the Gulim and so on, where Eir really becomes an existent entity. The Eir Lifnei Tzimtzum is called Eir HaKol Batzmusei. It's all within Atzmus, so to speak. But in Maimorim it explains that there's a difference. That's in general compared to Eir Lifnei Achrat Tzimtzum. All the Eir before the Tzimtzum essentially is an Atzmizdika one. What does that mean? That all the levels are aware that they are just a reflection of Atzmus. Even the desire to create the worlds, Lifnei Tzimtzum, is also senses only one thing. God wants to create worlds. It's all about God. The Tzimtzum creates a space for something to be able to say it's not only about God, there's now space for another entity, another consciousness. Lifnei Tzimtzum, there's no other consciousness. There's envisioning another consciousness. That's the lower level of Ayin, the lower level of Eir. So in general terms, you could say Lifnei Tzimtzum is all about Atzmus. And after the tzimtzum starts a relationship with something else, another consciousness. But when you break it down, and Chassidus breaks it down, only Chassidus Chabad goes there. Says, but in Lifnei HaTzimtzum itself, we were also revealed to us that there's also levels there. Not actual levels, but God envisioning levels, if you wish. So it's all Atzmus envisioning the levels. So when you break it down, Lifnei HaTzimtzum itself, you could say there's the Eir that relates to existence. There's the Eir Atzmi. All it is its connection to the to Atzmus and reflecting Atzmus. And then there's the Eir Hakol Batzmusei Mamish, like he says. That's the Yechelis Ha'atzmus to give off light. So before we continue inside, because I gave now an overview, and I think this clarifies a lot of matters. And if not, obviously, I would love to hear if anybody has any questions or comments. I'm going to unmute. There is, okay.
Oil hakolol be'atzmusoi is shmoi hakadmoin, or this is already a lower level?
I heard the question. It's hard to hear because there's this repeat all the time from, can't figure out why it is that way. Okay, whatever. I heard your question. Your question was, if Eir HaKol Atzmusei is shmoi hakadmin. So Eir HaKol Batzmusei, he uses two terms for Eir HaKol Batzmusei. Eir HaKol Batzmusei mamish. Look on the line that says Ve'ein HaKavana Eir HaKol Batzmusei mamish. And then a line before he says V'bechina zu ikra Eir HaKol Batzmusei. So the fact is like this. It depends what you're talking about. If it's Eir HaKol Batzmusei mamish, that's Yechelis, that's Shmoi HaKadmin. Absolutely. If you're talking about Ikra Eir HaKol Batzmusei, he's talking about already as Etzem HaEir, but why is it called Kol Batzmusei? Shu Kamoya Etzem. So we're not talking about Yechelis now. You're talking about Eir, but the Eir is sensing, all it is sensing is Atzmus. Remember, Shmei HaKadmin here is Yechelis. Yechelis is not something sensing Atzmus, even Eir. It's Atzmus has the capacity to manifest in an Eir that senses Atzmus. If you can make that subtle distinction, that's not so subtle actually, it's very fundamental. That's the difference. The reason we have this level is because ultimately that's where Atzmus meets Mitzias Nimtza. God's Yechelis, built in Mitzias Nimtza Yechelis, his capacity to manifest in Mitzias Nimtza. The manifestation is the Ikra Eir HaKol Batzmusei Etzem HaEir. The Shmei HaKadmin is Eir HaKol Batzmusei Mamish. But I added a third level now. Eir Ein Sof in general, Lifnei HaTzimtzum is also called in general Eir HaKol Batzmusei. So really, the word Eir HaKol Batzmusei can be used on the general, all the Eir Lifnei HaTzimtzum, because all it is what Atzmus wants. You could break it down further and say, no, it's the Eir Atzmi, because Eir Atzmi reflects only what Atzmus wants. And the Eir HaMispashet is also reflecting Atzmus, but Atzmus already wants existence. All Lifnei HaTzimtzum. And then there's Eir HaKol Batzmusei Mamish, that's not even Eir. That's just God's capacity to do all this. I hope that helped.
It helps. So the Yechelis is not even shy.
I apologize again because there's this background thing. I hear myself louder. So even when you ask a question, it's drowned out by my own voice. That's why I'm just muted everybody. I mean, you're not muted. You can speak, but I can't hear you. I just put my computer on silent. I hope we'll be able to manage this way through the class. Now, let me add one more thing to round this all around, and then we'll continue inside. Where does Rotzen come into the picture here? Rotzen. Remember, he started with Rotzen. Then he went back. He started with Eir, went to Rotzen, and going back to Eir. So I want to just put that into context. So on the bottom of page 1147, the Rebbe Rashab said, "U'kamoishin is bar le'il be'inyan harotzen." And he said that in Ratzon, we also have levels. We have a Ratzon Kloli. You want to build a house, you want a home, but there's no details. And then there's a Ratzon Prati of the specifics of the home. That's the example he gave on page 1148. So he said this Eir of Makif, of Ratzon, Eir Makif, it has some semblance of levels in it. So the Ratzon Kol you can't call a mocker, you can't call a source yet, but you can still say it's connected. It's a Ratzon, he wants it. Ratzon Prati, he says you can call it a source. But from this we see that in Eir HaSeviv, in the transcendent energy, you see levels. So you explain where there are levels in Eir HaSeviv, how there are levels. It's an all-inclusive. When you say you want something, you want everything equally. What are the specifics? The Eir Kloli, then Eir Prati. First there's a general desire, then the specifics. So he says that comes from the Pnimi. Because it comes through the Derech Eir Pnimi. The Kav, as we learned, the Kav travels, turns into a circle, travels further, another circle, another circle. Circles are Makif. But because the Pnimi, the Makif travels through the Pnimi essentially causes the Makif to assume some form of structure. Like you said, the difference between the Gulim of Ak, for example, and the Gulim of Keser, of Atik and Arich. Okay, but all of this, whether it's the Makif Kloli, the Ratzon Kloli, or the Ratzon Pratim, is already, it's all coming to some form of a Ratzon. You want something. And then it comes down into specifics. So he's saying all this is already the Eir Makif as it relates to existence. It's not the Eir Makif be'etzem, because the be'etzem, it doesn't have any relationship with existence, with the worlds. And it's called Makif because it's removed, not because it surrounds.
For the Chayzer, right?
So what does he do here with the Ratzon? Basically, the Ratzon belongs in the domain of Eir Hashayach La'elamis Lifnei Atzimtzum. Not in the Eir that Etzem Eir that's higher than that, because there he says that Yesh Madreg is Gam Ben Shem Shem B'chin Shaychas La'elamis. That's where Ratzon and Hashara, the desire, and Hashara where he allocates, envisions and allocates resources toward that. And these are the two levels of Eir. He calls Eir she'enish b'chin shaychus kal le'elmas u'b'chinis Eir ha'atzmi, what I described before, she'en b'chinis hamshacha ba'atzmi. The only thing is, you could say it's hamshacha min ha'atzmus. It's already now become Eir, but the Eir itself is not moved anywhere. It's completely reflective of atzmus. And this is the Iker Eir Kol Ba'atzmusei, not Yechelis, what I said, the Shmoya Kadmin, as he says in the parentheses. This is Etzema Eir. So Etzema Eir is essentially the Makif Amiti. Eir Makif Be'etzem. And the Eir that we're going to learn that relates to worlds is where the Ratzon already appears, whether it's a general desire, a specific desire, or even lower, Hashara, which is already allocating, envisioning and allocating. We're soon going to learn 3 levels in Ratzon. Okay. So I want to continue from after the parentheses, or a line after the parentheses. Again, I'll just pause if somebody wants to ask something.
So the Etzem oil is lower than the Shmoy.
Correct.
I can ask a question. Can you hear me? Yafi, can you hear me? Hello? Yoo-hoo.
Go ahead. You could ask. Yes.
Okay. So we mentioned before there was a makif that was hidden. How does that fit? Does that fit into our picture? There's makif or chazer is higher and higher and higher. Does that fit into our picture somehow?
Yeah. Makif achoizer. Before, let's see.
Right in the middle of the parenthetical statement.
Yeah. Makif choizer in this case is etzema Yeah. Etzema the first level of outside of Atzmus.
Okay. And that's in Helm after Helm, that keeps going concealed more and more. So how would that fit with Etzema Or?
Because Etzema is not yet Gilui. It's completely only dedicated to Atzmus. So if you can't see anything in that it's all it is that Atzmus has now manifested in But as he says afterwards, he says clearly, he says clearly, שאין בחינת המשכה בעצמי, והיינו רק שהוא בחינת המשכה מן העצמוס. אבל העצמי אין בחינת המשכה ואין בחינת גילי כלל. Anyway, first of all, he just says, ukamoi b'chinas erchezer. He doesn't say it is the level of erchezer. He says it's like. In other words, you want an example of erchezer, of this level, in lower level, it's like makif of erchezer. That's first of all. Second of all, that's exactly what Etzema is. Etzema is not a revelation. Etzema is just a manifestation. Nothing is revealed yet. It's not revealed until it moves to the next level.
Oh, this is at a lower level. Also, this is after Tzimtzum or something like that. It's
There's
lower
no
than,
Tzimtzum yet. No, there's no Tzimtzum yet.
and that word Helm after Helm is
Helam
not.
Helam means Helam Atzmi. It means it's fundamentally beyond us.
Okay, it's not an active. It's not a verb state situation that keeps concealing itself more and more. It's just at one level, concealed.
Yeah, but it's infinite concealment.
Okay, gotcha.
It's called a Helam Atzmi sometimes a step below Helam Atzmi.
Okay.
Olam Machshava is a result of this level of Etzema oil.
Olam B'Ritzeinei, not Machshav. Olam B'Ritzeinei.
Olam B'Ritzeinei.
So he says Olam B'Ritzeinei. He says that's already the Eirei Sof Shem B'chinas Shaychus Ala Elimus. Because he's already desiring Elimus, yeah.
So this is the next step, right? After the
I don't know, next step of what? I don't know which steps you're talking about.
After the Etzem oil.
That's exactly what he just, read it inside. He says there's Etzem Ha'er and there's Pashtus Ha'er. Yes. Look, he says these words. V'yesh madreges gam be'erin so shlif net simshon shem b'chin shayches ala elmes u'kamei sha'ala b'ritzeinei. There's Atzmus Eir Ein Sof, Eir Atzmi, and then there's a level of Eir that relates. That's what I just explained at length here.
Yeah.
Now remember, keep in mind, I solved the problem, by the way. So there's no background song now. Okay.
Another question, please.
Just keep in mind that everybody, I think it's very vital. I hope you all registered everything I explained today, because most questions will be answered based on what I've said. If it didn't register, either listen to it again or ask me about what I've said. Because I'm hearing from some of your questions that either you didn't hear what I said or you didn't understand what I said.
Okay, I have a question. In that parenthetical statement, you said in the same one that says the Shmo is Kadmon, it also has a small parenthetical within parentheses within that, ein or a sove bichlal. What are we talking about that there? It sounds like sove.
I believe I explained it as well, but I'll say the following. I'll explain it.
Okay. If you just tell me before Tzimtzum, that's okay. But it sounds like it's all the Soviv after Tzimtzum. That's my question.
Not necessarily. It doesn't say that.
No, but it doesn't seem limited. That's my question.
Well, a few things I'll say. I think you have to stop thinking mathematically like a map, a physical map, but more conceptually. I specifically explained the conceptual elements here because this is not a physical map. Lifnei Tzimtzum, there are no levels altogether. That's why there's a Tzimtzum. So Lifnei Tzimtzum, there's no levels. All we're talking about is, like I said the other day, and I'll say again now, is God's envisioning existence. He's envisioning. But there are levels that are beyond envisioning because since we want a full interface with Atzmus, we have to have levels that are beyond existence because then you don't have a true Atzmus involvement because Atzmus is beyond existence. So that's why in Eir, you have two elements. You have an element, it's like what I explained a number of times on lower levels, Av and Yira. Love is an intimate relationship and connection. You love something that's like you. Yira, awe, is a distance. I'm in awe of something. It's precisely the separation, the distance, in a good way. So when you have a relationship with Atzmus and you only had Ava and no Yira, it's like some people, they say some shuls, Rosh Hashanah looks like Simchas Torah. Other shuls, Simchas Torah looks like Rosh Hashanah. That's not the way it's meant to be. On Rosh Hashanah, it's Yom Neroyim, is days of awe. That's when you recognize that Atzmus and God is beyond you. And you're bottled in a good way. Beyond you, you're in awe of it, you're absorbed by something greater than you are. Sukkot and Simchas Torah, Yemini Techapkeni, is the opposite of Yom Neroyim, it's the days of Simcha. Simcha is like Ava, is a connection, you celebrate with God. When you're standing in front of God in the palace, you stand quietly, you don't dance and sing in front of the king. Comes Sukkot and Simchas Torah, we dance. Here it's now an avadik, a close relationship. So the same thing in Lifnei Tzimtzum, you have an Eir that reflects Atzmus. That's all it is. What it does to us, it creates bittul in existence. Because it's something that doesn't relate to us. This is like seeing Atzmus in his full glory. But you see it to some extent. We don't see it because it's still not Eir Begoli, but there's a concept of an Eir that all it is Atzmus in Mitzias Nimtza. But there's no reflection, there's nothing. All it is an Atzmizdika expression. Yechelis, or Shmoya Kadmin and the Yechelis, what he calls in Tzamach Vav Yechelis, that's even beyond that. That's altogether not even in existence. That's Atzmus has the capacity to manifest in Mitzias Nimtza of Eir. So Eir Atzmi is no Hamshacha yet. It's only thing you could say is it represents Atzmus. That's all you can say. So that ultimately is going to affect us in a bitteldika way. So what he's saying in this parenthesis is that we're talking here is not the Kavanah Shmaya Kadman. That's beyond everything. That's just to explain how Atzmus has the capacity. But here we're talking about Kol Se'er Lifnei Tzimtzum. His Eir HaKol B'Atzmus is the Eir Atzmi, which in general is actually the root of Eir HaSevev. Why is Sevev Kalalmin Makif? Because it doesn't relate to existence. It's beyond existence. It's only that later Sevev will travel through the Kav and therefore begin to have a structure of Ratzon Klali and Ratzon Prati and so on. Well, I should correct myself. Because of the Kav, it will have levels of Sevev after the Tzimtzum, Ak, Keser, Atik, Arich. But Sevev Be'etzem, if you remember, he says, what do you say about it? Era Makka Kumeshu Be'etzem? And Ein B'china Sheiches Klal Elems. That's why he says here, V'chein Eira Sevev B'chlal. Eira Sevev, the way it is Be'etzem, it's rooted in Etzem Ha'er. Mamala Kalaman is rooted in Ispashtus Ha'er. That's why ultimately the second level of Eir is going to, after the Tzimtzum, become an energy that fits and tailors to existence. Eir Atzmi is the key force behind Eir Makif. But there's a place where Eir Makif and Eir Pnimi meet. And even Lifnei Tzimtzum they meet. Because remember, the Eir Atzmi is then going to go into Ispashtus Eir, and they'll become a Ratzon Klali, and a Ratzon Prati, and a Hashara, a envisioning and allocation. So, but if you talk pure Sevev is connected to Eir Atzmi, it's removed from worlds. Pure Pnimi relates to the air that relates to existence. Remember, both are lower than Shmoy HaKadmi. That's not in discussion here, as he points out. So that's their pure. But then they're going to interact. After the Tzimtzum, Pnimi and Makif interact. Even Lifnei Tzimtzum, there's an interaction, because remember, I said this a few times based on volume 1, that in the Eir HaBligvul, in the infinite possibilities of the makiv be'etzem, atzmi, there's going to be one that he's going to choose. So essentially, at the end of the day, the Ratzon is going to come out of the and that the Ratzon Prati and the Hashara. So basically, that's where makiv and primi meet. And after the Tzimtzum, they not just meet, they become really interconnected. That's essentially the point. Okay?
That Shaira is unlimited up the etzem. The
Hashara?
Yeah, it was my impression that it had a makor and limitation also before Tzimtzum. And it was
What had a makor? I don't know what you're referring to.
That Hashaira. Yes,
what Hashaira? Hashara b'koyach? Shir atzme b'koyach?
Esther Siros Genuzos, Lifnei Tzimtzum.
What's up? You have to tell me what you're referring to. The Shir atzme b'koyach?
Is that talking? I have to get the line. I don't have that line, so I'm not sure. I think so. Yes.
So again, you're talking technical now, or you're talking conceptual?
Technical. My impression.
Technical. I don't relate to the technical, just for the record. But so tell me what level you're talking about.
Okay, Shir Atzmo. It's right above that little parentheses. Hainu Pinus Apinimi. That's about 15 lines up, and right there goes Shir Ba'atzum B'Kayach.
So he said clearly where that is. It's an Eir Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum in the air that relates to existence.
And when we have Tzimtzum, that becomes...
There's no Tzimtzum yet.
Right, but when there is Tzimtzum,
what about it?
Then it becomes Essesuris Genuzos.
No, Essesuris Genuzos are before the Tzimtzum in this context.
Or it becomes the revelation. Is the Shishira the Essesuris Genuzos?
Yeah, but that could go back to the beginning of Ayin Beis. He's not talking about that here at all.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll see how it comes out. Good. Unless there's more to say.
No, what he has to say is that he's talking about two levels of interface in Eir. Okay, so after the parentheses, he says, so Ikra Eir al-Kol Batzmuse now, we're talking about is Etzem Eir, or Eir Atzmi. So in Eir itself, there's Eir as a functional light, and there's the essence of Eir, which is to reveal Atzmus. So let me ask you a question. When you see a shliach doing faithfully his work, and he's doing exactly what the Mishaleach wants, is he Etzema Eir or is Pashtus Eir, in your opinion? Let's hear if anybody can figure it out in that example. I'll use a second example as well. Something is dedicated completely to the source, but it's functioning and doing its job. So which one is it? Etzema Eir or is Pashtus Eir? If nobody wants to attempt to answer, I'll answer. It's a rhetorical question.
It's Pashtus, of course.
No, there's two parts to it. If you're talking about the dedication, that is completely dedicated, all he cares is what the source wants, that's atzmi. It's not functioning. His pashtus ha'er is how the air relates to the function that atzmus wants it to do. So in essence, you have two levels of air right there. One is completely, all it is the etzem of what atzmus wants, and then there's the specifics of what he wants. So is the focus on the source that wants it, or the source that's emanating, or the focus on what it needs to get done? That's the difference between etzem eir and ispashtus eir in simple English. And in truth, you need both to be complete. In the kavanas of mitzvahs, when you're putting on tefillin or any other mitzvah, is your kavanah to fulfill what God wants, or is your kavanah on shibud halev ha'meach and binding your heart and mind through binding the straps? Which one do you focus on? What God wants, or on the details of the mitzvah? The answer is both. Asher kedushan b'tzeisiv v'tzivanu is a kavanah klalis. That's only reflecting the Asher kedushanu. And then there's the specifics, what he wants. And the truth is we need to do both. So there's really two levels in the commitment. One is just to reflect whatever God wants, and the other is the specific. That's just an example a bit about these two levels. Okay. So he says this level is the level of Eira Kol Batzmuse Beikar Er, Ukiyadua the Er Makif Ein Bechinis Yitzim and Atzmus. Er Makif is not a Yitzim and Atzmus because it's a reflection of Atzmus Dika power beyond existence. The primary place where this reflection of what Atzmus is in Etzema Er, Shehu Kamoya Etzem. I just read the last lines of the parentheses and the line after. Or Kaklala Yadua, like the principle, the known principle, the rule, the known general rule. The Kol HaKol by Etzem, everything that's encompassed in their core, Harihu Kamoya Etzem, is like the Etzem. So this Etzem Ha'er is considered like it's encompassed in the core, even though it's not the highest level of encompassment like Kadman, like Shmoya Kadman, which is Yecheles Atzmus. This is Ha'er, but it's completely consumed only with one thing, the Etzem. That's all that matters. And now he's going to give an example for this. Ukamoi, like, he's going to talk about the fact, HaKeiches HaKlulim Benefesh. The faculties that are encompassed in the human spirit, in the human soul. Now, we have to say that if there are faculties that emerge, what we call hispashtus, hakeiches, in keiches gluyim, you see faculties. You have to say they come from somewhere. Where do they come from? Remember, God forbid, a corpse cannot see, cannot hear, cannot function. Doesn't have any faculties. You have limbs and organs. The eyes can be intact, the ears are intact, the heart, the mind, everything's intact. But there's no functionality. Why? Because there's no soul energy going through it. So if you see faculties functioning on the outside, you have to say they're coming from somewhere. So this is what Chassidus calls Eira Keiches HaKlulim Benefesh. Not the way they're expressed in actual function, but the way they're encompassed in the nefesh, and here are the words. Shehem netuyim u'mushrashim be'etzem ha'nefesh. Netuyim means they are, well, netuyim and mushrashim, they're both rooted. Mushrashim is rooted, netuyim is, how would you define netuyim differently than mushrashim in English?
It means planted.
Implanted, ingrained, embedded. I mean, these are all good words. Embedded, ingrained, implanted, and rooted. Okay, implanted and rooted would be the closest, I guess, to the technical. Be'etzem ha'nefesh, in the core of the soul. Shein keiches atzmim mamish. As they are there, they're keiches atzmim mamish. They're just like the nefesh. Remember, this is not yecheles ha'nefesh. This is not nefesh neise keiches. The equivalent of Shmoya Kadman in the nefesh would be the nefesh, the soul, has the capacity to give faculties. Here we're talking about the actual faculties, but they're not actual faculties yet. They're completely on the same level as the Etzem HaNefesh. That's called Keiches Atzmim. I'll explain in a moment a bit more. Let me just finish the sentence. The Kamoisha Etzem Eina Begeder Hamshacha V'Gilui, just like the core, the essence, is not in the league, not in the realm of Hamshacha, transmission, Vigili and revelation, Kamoy Kena Keches, same with these faculties, Ha'atzmim. Ima Yesem Keches Levad, even though they're not the nefesh itself, they're only faculties. Hanihem B'Kol Mokim Atzmim, nevertheless, but they're on an Atzmizdika level, they're core faculties. She'ena Begeder Hamshacha Klal, Hamshacha Vigili, sorry, that are not in the realm of transmission and revelation. Okay, I know it's hard to understand this, but that's why I gave the long explanations before. Let me explain it this way. I'm going to just take the ability to throw. Koyach hazrika is a faculty. Your arm has the power to take an object and throw it. I'll say to you, how far can you throw a stone? So you say, whatever. An average stone, I can throw it 50 yards. I'm just throwing out a number. Someone will say, is that your full capacity? You'll say, no. If I try harder, I could probably throw it 60 yards. If I step back, I run back. Is that your capacity? You say, no. If I exercised and conditioned myself, and I got my muscles worked up, I could throw it 100 yards, like running a marathon. Right now, I can run a mile. If I work, I can run 2 miles. Work very hard, I can run 20 miles. Whatever the capacity is. Can you run 40 miles? That I can do. Maybe they reach a certain limit. So what do you have here? Keiches hagluyim are the actual faculties as they're functioning right now. Keiches hanalamim are faculties, the potential you have. You have always more potential than you actually have. If you try a little harder, you can do more. Someone will say, my mind. You gaite mitzasi. Work a little harder, you can push yourself. I'm not talking about how far to push. I'm just saying that there's always more than what meets the eye. Right? We all agree with that. Okay. So we've gone from keiches gluyim to keiches nalamim. But keiches nalamim are still not the core faculty. That's just the potential that you have not yet actualized. Like many people, many of us have potential stuff and we haven't actualized it. Whatever reason, we're lazy, we didn't work hard enough, we didn't exert ourselves, we weren't pushed. You're pushed to the limit. Like what is the resistance? How strong is your push? If I resist, you push harder. So all this is gluyim and nalamim. Then Chassidus talks about keiches hiyulim, and then there's keiches atzmim. Hiyuli is somewhere in between. I don't want to go into hiyuli, doesn't mention it. I don't want to confuse matters, but think of it as even more potential. Keiches atzmi, a keich atzmi, has nothing to do with how much you're going to reveal or how much is concealed. It's the core power of the faculty. It'd be almost like saying every person is born with the ability to see. Eyes, the power to see. But for whatever reason, let's say something is damaged, or an injury, or there's something wrong with the container, the eye vessel, that the ability to see is limited. Would you say that the power to see is also limited? No. That's Chassidus brings the example, 2 blind people, even blind from birth, can give birth to a seeing child, a beautifully seeing child. Why? Because what they're lacking was not the koyach atzmi. The koyach atzmi was transferred to the child. They're lacking in more koyach gole, koyach helam, or maybe the keli itself. The nerve, it could be the nerve. Now, of course, God forbid, children can inherit also genetic flaws. But we're talking about in cases where lav dafka. So you would never say that a person who's in any way handicapped or in any way compromised, the etzem ha-keiches are compromised? No, the keiches gluyim and the keiches nalamim could be compromised. But the etzem ha-keiches are part of the nefesh. It would be like saying the nefesh was compromised. The nefesh has faculties. It's born with the power of faculties. What happens afterwards, whether it's due to the body not being able to be complete, like we become short-sighted or what's the word? Short-sighted or long-sighted, etc. That's already different aspects here. So the keiches atzmim are as intact as the atzmi itself, but they're not the atzmi. So the nefesh, God created a nefesh that has faculties. These are, we call them essential faculties. They're not yet gili and hamshacha. They're not revealed in any way. They didn't even manifest. They're just there. They're sitting like in the what's the word I want to use? In the belly of the etzem nefesh. It's like faculties, powers. The soul has powers. Then comes the steps how these powers begin to express themselves in a hidden way, in a revealed way, more and more and more as I described. The question a person could ask is there anything I can do to reach my koyach atzmi, not just my koyach nelam? That we said exercise, effort, hard work. But can you reach a koyach atzmi? It's a good question. And it's not for now, but yeah, obviously the answer is yes, but it takes a few things. Either God gives you a gift that allows you to go into a place like that, or very, very, very hard work. Because it's changing really, you're accessing something that is still who you are, but it's on a very essential level. You're going straight into the nefesh here. You're not just going into the nefesh expression in concealed or revealed faculties. So the example he's giving, he says, this is etzem ha'ir. It's not Atzmus. It's not this Atzmus, like it's not Atzmus HaNefesh, but it's nothing but. So whatever Atzmus is, the Eir has also. So it's not yet in the gather of Hamshacha and Gili. So it's like sitting there. So again, Shmai HaKadman is Atzmus's capacity to give off Eir, but not, he didn't give it off. Here, he gives off Eir, but it's an Eir that's completely still Atzmi, like the Keiches Atzmi. Okay? That's level 1 in Eir. Now we're going to the next level. Eir has a second level, like you said. There's 2 levels in Eir. But anybody wants to ask anything about what we learned just now? Because we're moving now to the next level of Eir.
You said that the last line you said was that the kokos atiming are just like the etzema or. Is that correct?
That's the example he's using here, yeah.
Okay.
An example. I didn't say it's exactly like etzema. He says, the way the Netuyim v'Shrashim, that's the example for etzema, meaning that something that's encompassed in the etzem is like the etzem. That's the point he wants to make.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Va'oyer hashaychus ala elamis, and now comes the second level of divine energy that relates hashaychus, that has a relationship with the worlds. That's a very big word. This is not relationship as you would usually understand it. This is all within God choosing to have a relationship. In other words, the first level of there's no relationship altogether. All it is manifestation of the source. Now it's starting to have some connection to what the source ultimately Nesava desired. Shaychus al-Elamis. But if you talk relatively speaking, compared to Lifnei Tzimtzum, compared to Lacharat Tzimtzum, all this, everything is no Shaychus to Elamis. That's why it comes in Tzimtzum, to make a relationship. So this is all within godly consciousness, relatively speaking, relationship or lack of relationship, or beyond relationship. The Rebbe has a letter in Tafshin Tes, 1949, where he was asked the question, how could you say there are levels, Lifnei Tzimtzum? I discussed it a while back. When it says in Eitz Chaim, the Arizal, that it was Er Poshut Mamala Kol HaMetzias. It was a shapeless and seamless light, energy, that filled everything. And there's no room, there's no levels. So how do you say there are levels Lifnei Tzimtzum? And the Rebbe gives 2 answers. One is it's relative. That in truth is pshitus, shapelessness, seamlessness is really only atzmos. Because anything outside of atzmos already has 2 things. The thing and the creator that put it there. So it's already not completely lack of identity. 2 things. Atzmos is the only thing that has no 2 parts. So everything. So what do you mean by pshitus? So you're saying lifi erech, the existence after the tzimtzum, that is, I'm saying it's poshet, it's shapeless. But if you really break it down, it's only relative, because compared to atzmos, it's not pshitus completely, because it still has itself and atzmos. Then the Rebbe says be'emikes, on a deeper level, and he gives an example. An eved poshet, a simple servant from Samach Vav is the example. When he's doing something for his master, for the person who is the Eved Oden, it doesn't make a difference if he's doing a little thing like giving him a cup of water or building a house for him. From the point of view of him, everything is equal. So he says, Lifnei Tzimtzum, pshittus means, yes, there could be details that God wants, but all that matters is that God wants it. Everything Lifnei Tzimtzum senses atzmos. And the Rebbe says, from a digdul kal b'divrei sofrim, from the small detail to the biggest mitzvah sesa daraisa. And even the distinction is also only because God says there's distinction, not because you sense distinction. So it's completely consumed with what atzmos wants. That is not enough to create a world. to actually create a structure, that Tzimtzum has to conceal even that structure, which is how God wants structure, is still too intense for the structure to emerge. It's the root of it. It starts there. But at the end of the day, it's still all about Atzmus. And you want to have a reality where Atzmus, or Atzmus Ha'er, I should say, because Atzmus is beyond, we're talking about the presence of Atzmus, is somewhat concealed, so then a structure could really emerge. Just adding a little explanation here from the Rebbe's letter. So now he says, the air now that relates to existence, remember, it's how God, it's all within the divine consciousness of air, lifnei tzimtzum, as it relates to existence. This is already an extension of the light and the energy. Loya atzmi, not the core. The core, all it is a reflection of Atzmus. Now, this reflection is now beginning to relate to something. Also because Atzmus wants it to do so. But this is already called his Pashtus Ha'er. Uba'ir hazeh. And now in this next level of the field of energy, that isn't just a field of energy of divine, it's now beginning to relate. He says, Ba'ir hazeh shayach loimer shekol ma shemispashet v'nimshech mismayet eireh. Remember we said the expression before that the last page, that the further it extends and transmits, mismayet eireh, the more that its light gets diminished. This you can only say in Hispashtus Ha'er, not in Eir Atzmi. I'm just looking what he said in the previous page. Okay, good, yeah. V'hainu, which means shekol ma shenimshach mispashet yeser, the more it transmits and extends, hu yeser b'chinas shaychus ha'le'elmus, the more it becomes related, the more it relates, or the more it becomes in a state of relationship with existence, with the worlds. Remember, Elmus here means all of existence. He doesn't mean specific world, he means the whole thing. The Bechlolos, in general, hu b'chinas eir ha'shaychus ha'le'elmus. In general, this level of Eir, in contrast to Eir Atzmi, the core Eir, this is an Eir that relates to existence. V'kol ma shenimshach mishpashet yeser. Looks like he's repeating the same idea. I'm not sure what he's saying. Okay, whatever. And the more it transmits and extends, hu b'chinas shaychus yeser ha'le'elmus. It more relates to existence. The Shaykh, next page, 1149. The Shaykh boy b'chinas rotzen kloli, and here in this level, you could there it's possible to have a rotzen kloli, a general desire, but it's saying is pratim and specific desires, as we learned earlier. All this is not possible in Etzem Ha'er because Etzem Ha'er there's nothing but reflection of the source, so there's no rotzen. Rotzen for what? There's no desire. That Eir doesn't have any reflect. God has not yet instructed the Eir to desire something, basically. And now he is in the second level. That the Eir is being instructed to begin to desire. Ubederach klal, says the Rebbe Rashab. In general, hu gimel madreges, there's three levels in the rotzen, in the desire. Rotzen klali, a general desire. V'rotzen prati, a specific desire. V'rotzen kodim, and a primordial desire. Rotzen kodim meaning a desire that precedes existence. And it's in that order. And he's going to explain what they are. The rotzen klali, the general desire, hu l'mayla dayin ma'elamis. So now in the second level of Eir, we're talking now breakdown of three levels of rotzen. The rotzen that relates to existence, three levels. The rotzen klali, l'mayla dayin ma'elamis, it's still above the worlds. It's not that it has no shaychus at all, but it's above. because just a general desire. The ima yeshu b'chinas seidus kavyachol, even though it's already a seidus, something was stimulated. There's some desire. It's not like before. Before this, there you can't say there's stimulation. You could just say there's that's it. There's no awareness, like we said about that. There's not even God Himself is not yet in a state of awareness of desire. No, He said this kavyach, but here there is He said this. It's not yet a stimulation that relates to action. It's only an awakening and a stimulation within himself, concealed within himself. It's like he wants to want. He desires to desire something in a very general sense, but it's not yet related to action. Nothing's coming of this. This can remain dormant inside a person. Let's talk about a human for years. Here, we can't say dormant inside Eir, obviously. Those are not appropriate words. But basically, this level on its own is removed yet from the specifics that are needed to actually build, to bring it into actualization.
Can I ask something about from the bottom of the last page?
Yeah, sure.
Is that a change in the R or just the kalim? If we call Olamis kalim, I'm not sure if that's the right word. Is it a change in the R, the shaykhis, more shaykhis, less shaykhis, or is it about the Olam?
First of all, there are no kalim. This is all before the tzimtzum, so there are no kalim at all. It's basically it's the progression, as I gave the example he's giving here. The progression once a desire emerges in, let's say, in the wanting to have a home. That desire could be on one level, you just want it in general. It could be years pass, and then what happens next is that the want is starting to become more practical. You're starting to think about, okay, what kind of home do I want? And then you actually continue to go as you get closer to the action. It's essentially a process of being removed from something as you get closer to the reality of it. That's what it means. So the light, the divine energy, there's stages where it's completely removed from everything, like atzmi. Then there's the that relates, and that goes through a bunch of gradations. It's like as you get closer or you get more you relate more to what it is that you want to create. So obviously this is not in time or space, it's conceptual stages. But it's essentially stages of how a person, like very often we want something, but it could take a while till you actually act on it. As you move closer, different things that cause us to move closer to it, that's called the air itself is going through stages as it relates more to the existence. Okay. So now he said about the first level of Ratzon is Ratzon Klali. He said that it's a dayan. It's still above existence, because even though there's been an awakening, a stimulation, but it's still a stimulation that is not connected to Peil Mamish. Many things that we have a certain sense within us, concealed within us, we want, but we don't act on it. As an example, commotion is bodily ill, as was explained earlier. Dibra Masl Atan Mitzav Ma'alef. This is a mimer in first volume. If you look below, it says page 121. So it's a long time ago. It's a continuation of the Maimorim we mentioned before, 106. Yeah. So he says, what did he say there? Be'inyan hachlota v'seiris haratzon. So there, the Rebbe Rashab explained, these themes we're learning here are really more elaborated there. He said that in Ratzon, there are different levels of Ratzon. There's, I'm going to say it first before we learn it inside. Let me just say it orally right now. There's a Ratzon HaMuchlad B'atzmusei. That is, like I mentioned the other day from Yevomis, that Misha ein le bayis ein le adam. Meaning, we are created that inherently, an innate part of us needs to have a home. In places of Chassidus and Samach Gimel and Tavshin Gimel, he explains that's because God, Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, since it's the Etzem, God wants to have a home in this world. So every human being also has an innate element. We're born that way. Just like we're born in Adam B'lo Isha, that we need to have a spouse, we're also born with this. Now, this does not mean it doesn't mean you're aware of it. It doesn't mean you're thinking about it. It means it could be completely embedded inside your deepest part of your subconscious, superconscious. And that's that. That's a Ratzon HaMuchlet. Then comes a Ratzon, a desire that begins to be stimulated. Something starts waking up inside of you. At some point, you feel, I want to marry. I want to build a home. That is already Hisedus. In that Hisedus, that stimulation, that awakening, there are many stages. Because you could want something and know about it inside you and not share it with anyone. And even you yourself, you thought about it once and then it gets buried. And then 5 years later, you remind yourself, 10 years later, whatever, it's not the time. Then comes a stage where you start really wanting it. You start working toward it. So the Ratzon is now evolving toward getting closer to fulfilling the desire you want until the point you actually get it done. So there's different levels, and that's what he's going to describe these levels right now. Because he wants to explain how the Eir, HaShaychus LeElemus, evolves. It's already a Ratzon somewhere. Now there's places where it's not yet stimulated, then they're stimulated. That's what he's going to say. What we learned is be'inyan achlota v'yisedus haratzon. There we talked about the determination. Achlot is determination. I made a decision, a resolution. And there's a sedus haratzon, the awakening, the stimulation of the desire. So what did we learn? The gam achlota hu acharei sedus. That when a person resolves, I'm going to do something, that's after there was a stimulation, something awakened in you, something egged you on, something stimulated you to make that hachlota. This is not the Ratzon HaMuchlet, the one that's embedded from birth, innate in you. That is that it's muchlet, not in a conscious muchlet. It means it's established desire innate in the human being, the etzem hanefesh, and the etzem of the soul, like the keiches atzmim, similar to that. It's just there. Bli sedus klal, without any stimulation. Like I said, it's there. It could sit there the entire life and it shouldn't even emerge. Like it says elsewhere. This is Tafrei Samach Gimel, Rosh Hashanah Maimarim, and Tafshin Gimel from the Frierdiker Rebbe, which do what Tzadik Daled does to Ayin Beis. Tafshin Gimel talks about Ratzon HaMuchlet and Ratzon HaKodim and all these different levels of Ratzon. He says that we're not addressing that. Interestingly, he's already said twice that we're not addressing something here. Shmei HaKadman, which is like Kol Ba'etzem, and now he's saying it on Ratzon HaMuchlet, which is not quite like Shmei HaKadman. This is more like Etzem HaNefesh. We're not discussing the Ratzon HaMuchlet B'etzem HaNefesh. Ach in achlotahu, what is this achlota we are discussing? This determination, this resolution. Hushan is saying about Dover. That he's saying about Dover. He was something. He's stimulated for this thing that he wants. There's a stimulation. Something is stimulated. Something is aroused. A desire. For huchletetzle, sheroi lirtzes bezeh, and he determined that it's worthy that he desire this. So it's not just he determined to get it. He determined that it's worthy to desire it. In other words, it's something worthy to pursue, basically. But this still does not mean that he's pursuing it. This is not yet a Ratzon Mamish, an actual desire to do it. I mean, how many times, I can tell you from me, I'm embarrassed to say, how many times Someone presents an idea and I think about it, I say, great idea. And I even say, I want to do it. And then it remains, it sits, whatever reason. Doesn't mean you actually started making a plan. You know, people tell me, you're going to write another book. So I say, I definitely want to. I made the decision. So how close is it to action? It's another story. So you have a desire. We're not talking about the mukhlit be'etzem hanefesh. That's embedded. We're not talking about that. We're talking now, I say this, and you even came to determination that's worthy. It's a good thing to want, something worthy to pursue. But it's not yet mamish that you began acting on it. But on the other hand, it's not like it's not a will. It's not like you said, you know what, I'll consider it. I'm not sure I really want it. No. You say to Sarotzen, who shabab b'chinas rotzen mamish. You actually desire it. Shereitz about davar. He wants this thing. But he has not yet done anything. The rotzen has not moved toward an actionable rotzen, basically. V'zeh inyan rotzen klali. This is the first level of rotzen, a general desire. Shubchinas hachlota. That's not just a desire, it's a hachlota. It's the resolve, a determination, determined. Then comes the next rotzen, rotzen prati. Remember, he said three: rotzen kloli, rotzen prati, and rotzen hakodum. Rotzen kodum. The rotzen prati. This is a specific desire. Husha nesera kavyachol berotzen be'elamis. It's not just I want to have this thing, but it's nesera kavyachol is kavyachol, so to speak, stimulated with a rotzen for these worlds b'poel. The hainu berotzen bizgalus lias elims b'poel. He's not just desired in concept, but a rotzen that bizgalus in a revealed way, not just hidden within himself, lias elims b'poel, that should bring existence of the world into action. That's when you make your first phone call and you call up a contractor or an architect or whoever it is that's going to build with you. That's called the rotzen is now relating to actually doing it. Now remember, Lamaila, you can't say it's due to procrastination or laziness, God forbid. It's due to the fact that godliness, you want to always have in the interface levels that are removed from existence. So this rotzen is not a game. It's because just like there's the first air that just reflects Atzmus, now we have a rotzen that wants the worlds, but it still remains God's rotzen. It's not yet a rotzen that's an actionable desire. That's part of the process of interface, because you want to connect to that part of Atzmus too, or that part of godliness beyond actual. It's like we talked about the artist. The artist now is determined he's going to create art, but he's not just creating it. Then he starts, I'm going to create the art now. In our process of connecting the art to the artist, you want to not just connect to the artist that's in an actionable state, but also to the artist that's in a rotzen state, that he wants it, to the point that you connect even to the artist beyond that as well. So this is not because God needs time to think about whether he wants the world and just takes time till he figures it out. No, this is a very deliberate process of more removed from existence to getting closer to existence, as we said, more shaykhis. Okay. V'hu inyan. And this, rotzen prati, this is sha'olah b'ritzeni lahaitzil livrei. Now we're using the words lahaitzil livrei, not just olah b'ritzeni desires existence. Lahaitzil, to emanate, livrei, to create, or livrei, to create. He wants atzilus, bria, yetzira, asiyah. So that's level 2. And level 3, the lower level, lowest level, rotzen hakodum. Hu shekodum el agili. So now comes the next step. This second step has now moved it from an abstract desire that's there, that's active, stimulated, and determined, but not actionable. He's moved it now to an actionable, we're going to do it. But we're going to do it still doesn't mean that you have laid out the plan. So now comes Rotzen Kodum. This is Kodum El Agili, which means one step before it actually becomes revealed And what does he do in this stage? Now he's envisioning, and shir atzmei b'keach, he allocates within himself, in his potential, the resources, the specifics. So essentially, you have this very often. Somebody comes to an architect, or somebody comes, people come to me all the time, they want to write a book. Okay, what do you want to write about? I'm not sure. I want to write a book. So I said, we got to figure out what you want to write about. And I say, okay, what are you interested in? Where do you have experience in? What's in your heart? What would you like to communicate? Okay, I lost my father, God forbid, when I was a young man. I want to talk a book about pain and how you grow through it. There he's moved from a rotzen klali to a rotzen prati. Okay, but you still don't have a book. The next step is, okay, now you really want to do this? Okay, come back to an outline. Give me an outline, what the chapters are going to look like. 20 chapters, 10 chapters, outline of the chapters. What message you want to get across? What's the title, the working title of the book? So you see here, a rotzen klali, a rotzen prati, and rotzen kodem. You can have a rotzen prati, and I want to know what I want to do. Lahait tzil livre, I want to tzil sabri, but now you have to define, you have to create an outline, you have to create a structure in your plan. It's still in your rotzen. That's rotzen hakodem. So you see how specific, step by step here, that gives us the ability, remember we talk about interface, ability to retrace the steps. We can retrace this world and existence, this piece of art, this product that God created, the producer created, not just that there's a God, but literally to stage by stage where God plays a role, how the Rotzen Kodum is the outline and specifics, the Rotzen Prati is a specific desire, and Rotzen Klali, a general desire, all the way back to levels of that are beyond the Atzmi, beyond desire altogether. It's just a reflection of Atzmus. Now, of course, you understand that all driven because of Sava Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's why there are all these levels. But these levels give us stepping stones and give us rungs on the ladder that allow us to connect. And it all comes down to where you're at, how deep you connect. Even on a human level, someone you deeply love, you can connect to them on the functional level, the specifics. You can connect to them in the Ratzon Prati, what they want. We know specifically what they want, but it's not yet in outline form. And then with the Ratzon Kloli, you just know in general, they want something. And all the way back to their Etzem, all the way as deep as you can go. But you can't go to the Etzem before going through these levels, especially when you're climbing from the bottom up. The kol zeh, and all of this, hu b'bchinas ispashtus se'er, all these three levels that we spoke about in Ratzon now, or really all levels, all the levels, this is all in ispashtus se'er, the extension of the energy and light. Shu b'bchinas ispashtus v'gili, because that's in a state of extension and revelation. And now the parentheses, he says what I mentioned before. That's why I wanted to qualify it. The be'eda in social he's qualifying in truth. Everything before the tzimtzum, eidei sof, everything is askalus batz musay. You'll say, 1 second, how does that contradicts everything we learned here? No. That's why he says b'chlolus. I'm saying, then it says, akol hu b'skalus batz. No, not b'chol. Sorry, I thought he said that word. No, he's saying, he's qualifying and saying, if you talk generally compared to acharat tzimtzum, all of it is b'skalus batzmuse, because it's all only about what God wants. Even the details that we just spoke about, the detailed outline is also mitzad atzmuse. So how do we talk these levels? So he's saying, what we mean is pashtus v'gilui in that kol batzmuse itself. How all God is envisioning it all, you have the levels. You have Etzem Ha'ed, which is just reflection of Atzmus, that's Atzmi beyond Gili. You have Ispashtus Ha'ed, that's a Gili, which comes into levels, in general, the three levels, a Ratzon Klali, a Ratzon Prati, and Ratzon HaKodem. And then you're ready for the Tzimtzum and creation. But the point is that everything is Kol Batzmuse, Skalos Batzmuse. as I mentioned before. So it's all really depends what you're addressing here. But clearly, we're talking in Lifnei Tzimtzum itself, there are these levels because each one relates to a different aspect of the whole process. So Shubachinis is Pashas Vigili. He's qualifying. We shouldn't understand. It's not his Pashas Vigili like after the Tzimtzum, basically. V'nase Yeser b'Bchinas Shaychus Ala Elmas. And it becomes increasingly more relatable to existence as you move from Ratzon Klali, Ratzon Prati, Ratzon Kodum, HaKodum, Ratzon Kodum rather. Yeah. Aval Atzmus Ha'er. Now he's going back to the first level. But the core level of energy, the Etzem Ha'er, Ein B'chinas Hamshach Klal. There's no extension, no transmission at all. Like he said before, it's only Hamshachim in Atzmos. But in itself, there's no extension. All it is that field of energy that's just reflecting the source. Now he adds an interesting parenthesis. I guess he means to say that even as it's nimshach from Atzmos, because it is one step beneath Atzmos, so to speak, it's also Kamoya Etzem, like he said. Anything from the Etzem is like the Etzem. You could say that's Pshat. That's one way to learn it. Or maybe he's saying that there's two levels in the Etzem Eir itself. How it is just Etzem Eir, Gam Kishim. No, I don't think he's adding another level because he did say before it's only Hamshach Mina Atzmus. He's either saying that whatever it is, anything you call, if you're going to call it any form of extension, it's like the etzem. Or you could say that, I mean, that's the way I would say it. No, that's the only way I would say it. I don't think there's another way to touch it. Okay. Well, I will say, you could say two things this way. One is that that anything it is only like the etzem, but you could say, is it because of the etzem or is it because the eir is so bottle? So maybe that's what he's hinting to. Because you could say that since the eir is all it is a reflection of the etzem, so mitzad the etzem is beyond expression, so is the eir. Or you could say deeper, that even the eir, even whatever it is also beyond expression. I'm thinking out loud. I'm not sure if I'm even making sense. Okay, so we have the two levels. And in general, both levels, even the highest level is still oir. It's not atzmus. It's only etzema oir. So all it is a reflection of atzmus, but it's oir. And that's why it's possible to say, capable of saying, there's an etzem oir and ispashtus oir. If it was atzmus mamish, you can't say on God etzem and ispashtus. Only qualification is that the core energy, the core light, is like atzmus that's not in a state of extension. That means, what means hamshacha? Like we say by ispashtus, by the extension, that it should be an extension where it's subject to diminishment, and has a relationship to the world's existence and to the cosmic order. And it has the properties like every core essence that is not extendable and it's not divisible. That's what this etzem oir is like. So it's still oir, but it's an oir that carries all these properties like the etzem. And the extension of light energy, that's in the state of transmission. These are the two levels. This also is the two levels of ayin. The etzem oir hu b'chinas ayin sheyesh amiti. The core oil that's not Hamshacha is the ayin of the Yesh Amiti, of Asmus. Ubchinis is Pashtus. And the second level of light that extends where the Rotzen is, different levels, Ubchinis ayin shal Yesh HaMesave. That's already the ayin of the Yesh that's going to come into being. Ma'achar sheyesh l'shayches al-elmas, because relatively speaking, compared to Etzem Ha'ir, it's already God envisioning existence. So that's the second ayin that's relating. So within God's consciousness, before the Tzimtzum, you have a state of consciousness that's beyond everything. You have a state of consciousness that's beginning to relate to existence. Ubeprotis, as the Rebbe Rashab. And when you break it down in more detail, yesh gam ba'er zeh chilukim madreges kanal. So in general, it's these two levels. But when you break it down, also in this area, there's also a bunch of levels. It's not just connection to the world. There's the different levels he described, namely the Ratzon Klali, the general desire, the specific, and the previous state before it comes into Gilead, Kodem. Okay. Okay, so my friends, we'll stop here. 11:49. Anybody want to ask anything? Okay, we'll stop here. 11:49, the end of the paragraph. I hope I did some justice to this. It's pretty heavy stuff, but let's all give it some thought, absorb some more. And if you have questions that don't come up now, you could always ask tomorrow.
Shkayach.